my lung function dropped from 100 to 50 and it just kept dropping. And they basically said, if we continue at this rate, your max is 2 years to live. I think people think it's really hard to understand when I say I'm grateful for being born into a life where I've had to fight for every inch of it. But without that, who would I have become? It's the excuses you make today that will be the regrets you have at the end of your life. I'm Sophie Grace Holmes and I am an online running coach, online triathlon coach. I create content and I share my life, especially living with a life-threatening lung disease called Cystic Fibrosis. So I'll just do a quick recap so that kind of you can get the full background. So I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at 4 months old. And it was quite a roller coaster from there because my mum and dad had never heard of CF. And if you don't know what it is, it's a genetic inherited disease that impacts the lungs, the digestive system, all kinds of different organs. And over time, they degenerate. And so when I was born, my life expectancy was 16 years old. So for my mum and dad, it for them felt like they were bringing up a baby to die. But obviously, little did they know the fight that came with that. And I personally wouldn't change the journey I've had. It has been hard and a roller coaster, but it's also given me the driving force to create the life that I probably beyond my dreams and also achieve things that I was told I'd never be able to achieve.
And from growing up as a kid with CF, having that number, that finite number put on you from a baby, which would have been such a difficult thing for obviously your parents and then for you as you're growing up as well. Like, how did you cope with that mentally as somebody growing up, going through those difficult times anyway without CF?
Do you know what? This is where the power of naivety, I think, comes into its own because, you know, obviously I knew I had CF. I was taking 80 tablets a day. I was in hospital every 3 months, sometimes staying in hospital for extra treatments, IVs, all sorts of things. But for me, like when I was at school, I used to love PE. And so my measure of like how well I was against the people in PE. And in my head, because I was top of the class, could beat everyone, I did all the sports in all the teams. I ran for county 400 meters, 100 meters. I competed my horse, all these kinds of things. I was like, well, maybe they've got the diagnosis wrong. Because although on the background of that, I had all those tablets and all the hospitals, I was doing better than they anticipated. But what I do remember is when I got to 16 and them saying, well, you made it. How do you feel about that? You know, as a 16-year-old, like imagine being told like, oh, well done, you made it to the, you know, the life expectancy, but who knows where it is from here. And I remember they updated it and just said, well, you know, now it kind of is 30. So I guess you're halfway through your life. Like, how do you feel about that as a measure? And even now, like it's such a young age to have to comprehend those things, especially when everything that's happened in life so far has kind of led me to being okay. So it's a tough one to get your head around. But I think until I was about 19, because my health was fairly okay, I just carried on as a normal teenager. And then when I did get to 19, I did get seriously unwell. My lung function dropped from 100 to 50 and it just kept dropping. And they basically said, if we continue at this rate, your max is 2 years to live.
How do you cope when somebody tells you something like that? Like, what do you do?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? And this is where the power of naivety comes in, because I was basing my thought process on my past. And I was like, well, I've been okay until now. They've suddenly turned around and told me that cystic fibrosis has caught up with me and that I'm actually going to die from it. And I just said, I just don't believe you and I'm going to ignore you. I don't have time to die. I've got stuff to do. And so I drew up a very long bucket list of things they told me I'd never be able to achieve. And 6 months after they told me that, you know, I've got 2 years to live, I summited Mount Kilimanjaro, did a few burpees at the top to celebrate and just sat there. And it's like, it just shows sometimes you can achieve things that, you know, 99% of people don't believe that you'd ever be able to do, but you have to be the biggest champion of yourself and believe it in yourself to be able to do these things. And that one decision that I made that day then created the next 10 years of my life. And so although that time was really tough, it also has given me what I needed. And so that's why I always believe in the power of, the hard and tough times, like they are there for a reason, and we always have a choice.
You obviously have an infectious love for life, like we've been speaking for 5 minutes, and I can already tell that. Do you think that is because you had those incredibly hard moments growing up and continue to have them? It seems like every day is very special to you.
Oh, 100%. And I am fully aware the problem with cystic fibrosis is it affects people so differently. And so just because I've been able to do these things, it doesn't mean that if someone followed my complete steps that they would be able to as well. But I think my mindset works in the process of, we as human beings think we've got time. We do have time, but time goes by really fast. And that's why if there's things in life that you want to do, you just have to have the courage and the bravery to step out of comfort and be like, do you know what would I regret more? Not trying, or trying and failing, but then, building upon what you want to achieve. And I think the greatest things that you can learn are when you fail, but actually without failure, you're not going to achieve anything, and you're not actually going to know what you want, and how capable you are.
Sometimes that's so difficult though, isn't it? To make that decision, whether it be in work, personal life, athletic endeavour, like to make that decision that I want to do that. It's a difficult one, and there will be people watching this thinking, like, how do I do that? What would you say to them?
Just start 1% a day. It's what I always tell myself. And there's a phrase that I always go back to when I'm trying to make a decision on whether I really want something or not. And usually this sends the fear that I'm going to miss out if I don't try. And it goes like this: it's the excuses you make today that will be the regrets you have at the end of your life. And for me, it's like, okay, so I've got this day. What am I going to do with this day just to even just be 1% better than I was yesterday, or 1% closer to the things I want to achieve in my career, my fitness, my personal life, all these things. And obviously you don't want to overwhelm yourself, but that's why it's like, what can I do? That small step does add up. If I do that on a daily or weekly basis, in a year's time, I'm going to be so much closer to the place I want to be. And the time is going to go by anyway. So we either use the time we have by doing the things that we really want to do and not worry about the thoughts and opinions of other people, or the time goes by and we wish we started a year ago.
You mentioned the word overwhelm there, and it feels like something that everybody has in their life. But for somebody living with CF and having to do what you do on a daily basis as well, does it ever become overwhelming? The fact that you are, a running coach, a triathlon coach, you're coaching all these other people, you have this thing you deal with on a day-to-day basis as well. Does it ever for you become a little bit too much?
Oh, definitely. I think it's safe to say I am 100% human, sadly human. I'd rather be a bit more powerful than that. But, human beings are powerful. And I think, this is why also we have to step back. I always sometimes, if I feel really overwhelmed, I'm in that space where I've got so many things to do, or I have to make decisions, I try and take a step out of my box and kind of take the bigger picture, the bigger view that, say, for example, like a friend would take of your life and say, okay, so these are the things I'm worrying about, these are the things I've got to do. How significant are these fears and worries are going to be in 5 years' time? So I always think, if they're not going to be that significant, and I'm kind of just got myself so hyper focused on one thing that in 5 years' time is not going to matter, I'm only going to spend 5 minutes worrying about it, and then I'm going to take action and try and do what I can to move forwards. Because I think it is so easy to get yourself into that mental loop of worry, anxiety, overwhelm. And actually, most of the time, the things that we do hyper focus on aren't actually going to be a problem even next week. So I think it's about stepping back.
I like to ask this question to everybody that comes on that has a fairly big social presence, which you have a massive social presence, over 100,000 followers on Instagram alone. Sharing your journey online is a very vulnerable thing because there are a lot of people there that can say whatever they want. And when it comes to health, I think that's magnified. Sharing your journey and sharing health updates online, does that ever become a bit overly personal for you, or is it something that you've kind of committed to and you think, this is part of my journey and I want to share every part of my journey?
It's a really good question because I think there's two sides to this. So obviously, I chose to share my journey to try and just help one person or provide one person with hope that they wouldn't give up. So potentially that could change their lives. And cystic fibrosis is or can be a very lonely disease because you're not supposed to meet someone else with CF due to cross-infection and making each other unwell. And I think actually it's probably the only disease in the world that's probably like that. And just simply by sharing the air that you breathe can cause a problem, right? And, that's why I first went out there and was like, do you know what? I've been lucky enough to be able to communicate with people around the world with CF and do some amazing things. But some people have never had that chance. Just to have someone that understands and knows what they're going through and how it can feel, because it's so hard. Because I think for me, where I've grown up and just lent into strength and had to be, survival mode, I guess. People look at me and go, oh, well, you're strong, you'll be fine. But sometimes you actually want someone to be that person for you. And that's why I did it. And so, there are, tough parts of that, which is the other side, where people then kind of throw negativity your way, which doesn't happen often, usually, very positive. But when people aren't doing as well as you, or people find it hard to celebrate your health successes or things because they're not doing so well and it's hard for them to relate. And the biggest example I can give that is 3 years ago, a new medication came out on the health service called Kaftrio. And basically it was, to date, the life-saving, life-changing medication, because what it does, it changes the way your genetics work. So the faulty gene that causes CF then changes and enables it to work a bit better. So essentially your body is functioning more normal. So people that were eligible for this medication had health increases such as lung function, digestion, all these things, which basically meant they could actually breathe properly for the first time and also live a very normal life. And some people, it saved their lives. They didn't have to have a lung transplant. But the unfortunate thing about this medication is that some people can't have it. There's 10% of the community that can't have it. And so people that couldn't have it were almost being like, well, it's not fair because you're more healthy than me anyway. And now you're on this medication. And I 100% get it. But I think, when you're coming from a position of being unwell and there's not much you can do about it than what you're currently doing, it is super hard. And so I do empathize, but at the same time, I don't believe in spreading negativity because I'm a firm believer of if you give out positive, positive comes back to you.
How did that medication change your life?
So Kaftrio changed my life in a huge way because it increased my lung function by 40%. And it brought me back to a level that I probably had when I was around 12 years old. And it was the first time in my entire life that I understood what it was like to breathe, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I didn't understand my own struggle because I didn't have the opportunity to do that till now. And I remember going out for my first run and actually I could breathe and I understood why people love running so much. And I've run my whole life to a good level. I pushed through the struggle because I didn't understand the struggle that I had. And it was really emotional for me because not only did I then have opportunity to actually see what I could achieve with my body, but it was almost the start of Sophie 2.0.
Are we talking black and white to colour? Is that what it felt like?
Yeah, it was insane. And I took the drug in the morning and within 3 hours, it was, you could notice the difference.
That is absolutely unbelievable. And your journey is kind of even more special because of the impact you have on other people. We've kind of touched on that already. But when people do, say to you, whether that is people from the CF community or people from other communities, Sophie, you're an inspiration. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have got out of bed this day. I wouldn't have tried to do this without following your journey. What does that make you feel like? And do you know how to kind of put into words what you've done for them?
I think it's hard, isn't it? Because you don't know how they're feeling, even though they're trying to express their feelings. But for me, it's my why. It's the why I put myself out on the internet, share the things I've been through, record hospital appointments, record updates, share my fitness, because if you can essentially almost save someone's life or inspire them just to try something, because growing up with CF, there was never any research around fitness or nutrition. And I really remember the doctor that told me that basically I was going to die when I was 19, I then went out of my way to prove him wrong with like stats. I worked with different physiologists, all these kinds of people. And every time I went into the hospital, would hand him an envelope being like, here's the proof. I could help you, maybe help someone else, like blah, blah, blah. And he just didn't listen. And he didn't listen for about 5 years until he came into my hospital room, and like he literally leant down on one knee and he was like, I'm really sorry, like I'm ready to listen. Like I was just too in my own situation to understand that maybe fitness is really important, and like to see all the things I've achieved in those times that he thought would never be possible with someone who had CF. And then about a month after he did that, there was another doctor that came in because I was preparing for another challenge, and I just needed to sign off. And this doctor said, I'm not signing you off on that, you're going to die. And I just turned around and said, oh, is this particular doctor in? Can you please bring him in and repeat that? And she did that. And he came and he just said, you're never seeing this patient again if you're going to speak to her like that. That's the mistake I made, and she's going to be fine, and she will prove you wrong. And it just, for me, is that was a massive turning point, because then ever since I've just kind of spoken to doctors since then, they've been like, right, what are you doing? What are you up to? What are you training for? What can we do to support you?
And finding, I guess, the correct doctors and them understanding your story must be very difficult, because everybody's story is different. And I would imagine yours is pretty unique when it comes to somebody that has done some incredible challenges and has completed some incredible races and has run some incredible times. Talking about challenges, talking about running, talking about triathlon, there's many things you've done, but is there anything that really sticks out as a personal highlight?
There's actually a couple, and there's a reason for both of those. So the first one is I got invited to the Bahamas. God, it must have been like 3 or 4 years ago now, to do a paddleboarding race. It's an 18-mile race across the Gulf Stream from the Bahamas to Florida. Sounds idyllic. It's through the night, and it's raising money for a charity in America with CF, obviously. And this is, again, where like sometimes the power of just saying yes and not thinking about it too much is so important, because this is obviously a very long way, 18 miles on a paddleboard. And I just said yes because I was like, oh, it sounds really cool. Know people that have kind of done it. How hard can it be? It's fine. It's going to be fine. Got to the Bahamas, realised I'd never paddleboarded in the ocean before, realised that I hadn't really done much paddleboarding. It was a very last minute decision, and just thought, oh, actually, it's quite a long way, isn't it? And people that know me know that if I'm ever going to do a challenge, there's one thing that's never in my favour, and that's the weather. Now, it will either be raining and to the extreme of like gale force winds, or it will be so hot that, you know, you're just absolutely suffering. This time around, it was thunder and lightning in the middle of the ocean, and we left at midnight. And this is the problem, right? And like the waves and the currents were all over the place, and the wind. And I remember just being like, oh, of course, like this couldn't just be hard enough as it is. It's like now testing to see what resilience I have mentally and physically to continue this race. And I just remember it so well. Like we got an hour in, I think, and the captain of the ship, because obviously you're following these boats, was like, oh, well done, guys, you're doing really well. You've done 3 miles. And I was like, I am absolutely exhausted. Like I feel emotional that I'm that exhausted. Because obviously normally the reason they do it in that direction is you have wind, you have flat water, you know, it's hard, but it's kind of a bit easier than we had. But the reason why this is actually the most favourite one is obviously the challenge itself, the fundraising, but picture this, sunrise, the storm goes away, the waters are flat, you're in the middle of the ocean and there is no land either side, and all you can see is this sunrise completely surrounding you and the peace. And for me, like I never would have experienced anything like that if I hadn't have just said yes. So the power of saying yes can change your life. And the other one was, I was only last year actually, I decided, basically I was in a bit of a rut with my training and I was like, oh, what can I do? And I was like, oh no, I can feel something like brewing, because I know what I do. When I feel like that, I have to then go to the absolute extreme of like, well, you've got to achieve something that you've never achieved before, because obviously that's the only way, which actually isn't, by the way, the only way. But for me at the time, I was like, well, let's see. And I've been training for Ironman and all these kinds of things. Had done an Ironman at home through COVID, and because my race got cancelled, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go further than that. I'm going to create my own ultra Ironman, and I'm going to do it in Lake Como because I love it. And it's going to be supported, but mainly self-supported. And it was phenomenal. It was amazing. The reason why that race also highlights is because the fact that I didn't plan it properly, but still survived. And I had like a great team. But the reason why, kind of for me, it built my resilience, it was the fact that I had taken into account that I was going to have to swim in the dark. Now, I don't know if you've ever swum in the dark before, but it's absolutely terrifying, like beyond belief.
Very discombobulating, isn't it? You just don't know where you are, what you're doing.
Great word. And so I was like, well, I'm going to have to suck it up because I can't tell people that I failed because of the dark. That's ridiculous. But what actually then transpired was I had no lake support because the support that we were meant to have on the boat was broken. We couldn't replace it in time. So I had to go out into the lake on my own and ended up swimming like 100-meter lengths until I got to 5K in the absolute pitch black. But the worst part was the fact that I was swimming, couldn't really see what was going on. I had tinted goggles because I didn't really take into account until I got there. I could also feel these fish swimming around me and I couldn't see them. And the sun obviously began to come up a little bit. And then I developed vertigo in the water because the lake's 400 meters deep and I couldn't see the bottom, and all I could see were these massive fish. And I was getting a bit cold, and I was like, but I also can't tell people that I failed because of the fish. Like, this is ridiculous. So I'm just going to have to like suck it up, get on with it, and then just get it done to get on my bike. And for me, that was like a real true test of character because I've never actually had fear with water before. And I had to overcome it very quickly because I'd flown all of my friends and family, my partner out there to support me. My sister had flown from Dubai. And I couldn't just like not complete this thing for myself, but also for the fact that people were there believing in me.
Do you think your journey with CF has built that resilience? Because you've just mentioned a couple of things, a couple of, experiences where you could have easily pulled the plug, whether it be 3 miles into the paddleboard or whether it be, getting attacked, quote unquote, by fish, in the dark waters of Lake Como. You could have easily said, I don't want to do this anymore. Do you think your kind of journey to this point has just made that resilience tenfold?
Oh, definitely. And I am so grateful for that. I think people think it's really hard to understand when I say I'm grateful for being born into a life where I've had to fight for every inch of it. But without that, who would I have become if I didn't have to fight for what I believed in and fight for goals? And I think it's the biggest lesson, especially even now where my health is more stable and so stable. Sometimes I have to remind myself who I am. And I'm like, if I'm struggling, I'm like, no, like you can get through the struggle and you can achieve the things you want to achieve, even if they're hard. Because I think if you're trying to achieve something, you always set the bar so high and you've always got to focus backwards so that that goal is there, but you've got to do the things every day to get to that goal. And I think with CF, like for me, I had to take 80 tablets a day. I had to go to the hospital. I had to do physio. I had to do training. I had to do all these things just to ensure that every single day I could breathe. And, that's why I think always lean into the hard.
You mentioned your family there when we were talking about the Lake Como challenge. And there will have been a point, I would imagine, where it was a bit of a turning point for your family, kind of accepting that you were going to do all these things. When you started challenging yourself, saying yes, pushing the boundaries, was there ever a point that they were like, Sophie, you've got to calm down here, what are you doing? Or were they always super supportive?
They were supportive, but I think obviously when I was really unwell, I was like, I'm going to go and climb Kilimanjaro. If I do it in the next 6 months, I'm going to be the second female with CF in the world to do it, and I'm going to be that person. I've always been quite headstrong, and I think it's because people have never believed I'd do anything, or always been like, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're sick, you're this. And I remember them being like, okay, all right, go and do it. And then I got back, and they were like, and I was like, right, now I've done that, I've got this idea. And they were like, oh God, this is the start of something. And then every single time I decided to do something, it was always that much bigger or a little bit bigger than the last. I think, they were supportive, but I think they always worried that I would get to a point of, pushing myself too hard and then becoming unwell. But my argument to them was, if I only have 2 years to live, what am I going to fill that with, so that I have all these amazing experiences by the time I'm 21? And so at least if I was going to die, I'd feel satisfied with the things I'd filled my short life with.
You mentioned in that, somebody may be saying, and a lot of people will have experienced this, but I think you probably more than most, friends or family or people online saying, oh no, you can't do that, don't be so stupid, you can't do that. And there will be people listening that are having that said to them now as well, saying, just to friends, I'm going to go and run a half marathon or do my first 10k, or maybe run their first marathon or ultra, and their friendship group or the WhatsApp group saying, don't be so stupid, you can't do that. Like, what would you say to those people?
Get new friends.
Very good answer. Very good
seriously,
answer.
I am a firm believer of your circle, and you have to be around people that believe in you. Even, if people say that to you, it's really important to understand that it is a reflection of them. It's not you. It's a reflection of what they believe that they can achieve and their own abilities. And do not let that phrase or people saying that stop you. Because even if someone came to me and said, I want to achieve this thing, I don't know if you can achieve it because I can't do it for you. But I believe that if you want it, you can do it. And if you put in the effort, that you will achieve it. So, if for your friends or your family are doing it, obviously you can't just eliminate your family. Well, you can eliminate your family, but obviously I understand that's slightly different. But I'm a firm believer of shutting doors and letting people go if they do not support the bigger goal, because as a person, unless we push each other and ourselves to achieve things, who knows what our ceiling is? Do we have a ceiling, So if you have people around you, and the internet doesn't really count because the internet is full of some very strange people that like to tear people down. And so if people are saying it's you online that you don't know, just try and disregard those comments. But if it's your actual friends, then I would either go to them and say, well, why don't you think I can? Or why can't you support me? And usually it'll be because it's a reflection of themselves. And surround yourself with people that do believe, or people that have done things similar, because they'll be able to help you.
And one of the best things in life as well is proving people wrong. That's what I always say. Prove people wrong. It feels so good, and I don't think there's many better feelings than proving somebody wrong. And your journey now has led to you to helping other people achieve their goals with your coach's hat on, with your training plan hat on. What does it feel like now? Helping your athletes, helping people that have come to you achieve whatever their goal may be.
Oh, it's amazing. And I think seeing someone's confidence grow and their excitement grow, and then them looking for the next thing. Like one of my clients last weekend achieved her first ever duathlon. And now she's like, well, maybe I'll do a triathlon next year. Maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. And it's like, unless you push yourself out of comfort and show yourself what you can do, you'll miss out on the excitement that you get from achieving that thing that you couldn't do before. And for me, just helping people and showing them what they can do and how capable they are, that will only impact positively for the rest of their life, like in different areas, from their career to their relationships, to the relationship they have with themselves. And there's a lot to be said for wanting to develop yourself through training and achieving things, because for me, my passion lies in physical adventure, as you know, and I love to push myself, not all the time, but at least once a year, to a place of second guessing myself. Can I achieve this thing? When you're mid-race and you're in pain and you're tired and you have that devil on the shoulder that goes, oh, you can't do it, you could just stop that and nobody would mind. And it's like pushing back into that situation of being like, but I can, and all I have to do is put one foot in front of the other, and eventually I'll get to the end. And that's when you really find out what you're made of, your capabilities, and actually what you want out of life.
This question is purposely pretty broad, but what does the future hold for you, Sophie?
Wow, that's a very broad question. Well, there's many things it holds, but I have just committed myself to my next challenge, which is something that I can 100% confirm that I've never attempted before in any capacity. And it's something that is quite a long thing. I think I can't remember the exact number, but it's over 1,000 Ks in length.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it's been something that's been on my mind all summer, and I weighed it up over the weekend when I was running, and I thought, if I don't do this, will I regret it? And in my gut, it was like, you will regret it, and so you've just got to get on with it.
And the reason that it was broad like that is because you never know kind of what sort of answer you're going to get, and I'm excited that I got that answer, because that is incredibly exciting. And I think we'll finish with this. You've been through a hell of a lot throughout your life to this point, and I know you're going to continue to inspire people, and people will continue to follow your journey and be inspired by you. In 10, 20 years' time, looking back at Sophie now, or Sophie over that next 10, 20-year period, what do you hope to achieve in those coming years?
I think on a professional level, just have helped as many people mentally, physically, in so many different ways, from mindset to fitness, achieve things that they are proud of, achieve things that they have stories to tell, and that their 80-year-old self would look back and be like, I can't believe I did that. I think personally for me, in terms of like a fitness situation, would just be to continue to try and defy the odds, gain a world record, which would be something I'd love to do, and just continue to live life with the fire that I have to experience and thrive, and just be able to inspire people to be brave enough to live life on their own terms.